So the presentation today is titled Outgrowing Your HRMS, or your Human Resource Management System. Sometimes it's called an HRIS. Kind of just depends which area you come from, IT, HR. And we're going to talk about what to consider before maybe you purchase your next one. So let's get some of the other standard practices out of the way. So if you don't know me, I'm Karin Smith. I am an implementation project manager here at Lanteria. I've been with them for about 4 years, just over 4 years, and I have lots of years in IT consulting and IT in general, with a serious focus on the human resources area, operational area, talent management area, learning management area, and done quite a number of projects with Lanterian throughout my career in terms of deploying applications. And again, with specifics around human resources. I put my email address there, so if you do have any other questions after the presentation, if you need to reach out, feel free to do so. A little bit about our company. We are an all-in-one software product with a target toward medium to large businesses. We also have a focus there that we are the SharePoint solution for an HRMS. And oftentimes when companies already have SharePoint deployed within their environment or already have leveraged that technology within their environment, that our product is also a really great fit in those types of worlds. Again, and that can be small, medium, or large. Our company was founded in 2006, so we have a number of years experience in building out this product, and it just keeps getting better and better. Some of the features and functionalities that we've been adding in the last years that I've been here have really made a big difference in terms of what the product's capable of doing out of the box, which is very key. Since it was built on SharePoint, we make some assumptions that potentially you might have some folks in-house that might want to custom code the application, and that is the case for some of our clients. But there's still plenty of folks who still want to leverage the framework of SharePoint, but they would like to see more functionality come out of the box. And I think now we have a great cross-section of both of those so that you can still customize this product to fit your processes and to fit your company's way of life, as well as have a lot of that functionality that maybe you weren't having that available to you in prior solutions, or even if you're just doing it paperwork or Excel based, you wouldn't have found. So we also have quite a number of users around the globe, for 200K at this point, and we support over 250 plus companies. We've achieved a number of awards here during this year in regards to being a leader, as we're rated by a lot of the HR groups and HRIT groups. And we also are showing here just a cross-section of the clients that use our product today and that we support. And as you can tell, they range from small to large, and again, can encompass anywhere from 35 to 3,500 employees or more. All right, so let's talk about outgrowing your current system. Now, oftentimes when companies start up or maybe make an initial selections for an HR application, they make some choices. And again, it's no different than buying any other technology in the world. If you've ever bought a computer or a laptop, and then, a couple of years later, the technology completely changes, or displays get better looking, processors get faster, memory gets bigger, devices get smaller, all of that, you understand the concept behind growing pains. And it's a rather organic process. So when you purchase the initial system, maybe you had a 5-year plan to, grow out of it at some point. It's your time now to reflect upon your purchase, and you've heard enough from all the stakeholders to say, hey, it's time for you to pick a new product. In this case, maybe it just needs to expand to the needs of your company because you're growing. expand to the needs of your business folks, because now they've become savvy. They moved off of Excel worksheets and they've went into the existing application, and now they've really begun to understand what they can do, how it can improve their lives, and how it can automate a lot of processes, which frees up time for everybody in the organization to work on even more things and maybe more important things. Maybe the system couldn't integrate into other systems that you had, or maybe those other systems didn't even exist and now they do, and there's not a good fit there. Maybe it wasn't user-friendly. Maybe it didn't have good reporting. So from the user interface perspective, it did the job, but maybe now there were enough, again, comments, feedback to say, we'd really like something even better for our employees, for our end users, administrative staff, whoever's taking care of the application, that kind of thing as well. And also maybe you picked a platform that didn't integrate with SharePoint, your Microsoft product line, Office 365, and maybe that's something that you need as well. So to change out the product, again, no different than any other application, solution, equipment, all have growing pains, and they all extrapolate costs over a period of time, and then they need to be refreshed. So what do we do now? If we're at this stage, you've been tasked to find a new solution. Maybe what's some of the things you should consider? So here's our lovely goldfish stuffed into a too small of a fishbowl, and this is what it might start to feel like for some of the folks using the current solution. And what can you do? So typically, again, some of this presentation you'll see will come from HR side, some will come from the IT side, some more from the project management house. And so this slide definitely has to do with how to plan for that upgrade strategy when you've determined that you need to replace. So one of the first things you want to do is collect all of that information from all those folks that are stakeholders or participants, touch points, you name it, whoever they may be within your environment. I'm sure if you're IT, you've probably already heard from all of those folks and their requests, or maybe even positioning for funding for the new year, to say, hey, this is where we want to spend some funding, some monies, and say we want to build or get a new system. And you may even be trying to weigh, should I upgrade, maybe just add customizations to the current solution, or maybe I do need to go get a completely different solution. So you also may be in that area. But it's best to go and collect all of that data. It's good to hear back, and then it'll give you a sense of everybody's opinions for you to consider. The next thing obviously is plan. Try to figure out what do we need to do in terms of finding a new solution, determining if there is something out there that we can move to. So that upgrade plan, bring it all together, make a decision, and then consider deploying it. So I had a little fun with the presentation. So getting the band back together means that you probably, if you've done this project once, you're going to probably do something very similar again. You're going to get all the folks back together that had previously participated, and maybe you're going to add to that list as well, because maybe some of the folks that needed to weren't there last time. Maybe I see a lot of different when I get assigned new clients. I hear a lot of different stories. Sometimes IT picks the product for HR, maybe not always to HR's agreement. HR sometimes likes to pick the product and say to IT, you need to deploy this. Sometimes not to IT's agreement. And then the best ones are obviously when everyone's in agreement, and that's what we want to try to work toward. And hopefully this presentation will give some of that guidance on how you can get everybody to agree. And probably the biggest piece there is everybody just has to be heard. So if HR is saying, I need this, and IT is saying, I need that, then you just try to figure out how you can bring those two things together. So oftentimes IT has a strategy for the company as to, again, what's the framework and platforms they're going to work on, aka SharePoint. And HR may not understand what that really means or what the impact would be if they go and pick something that's off platform. And again, I think as everybody listens to everybody else and everybody gets heard, then everybody gets a chance to understand why you're leaning one way or the other. So since it's December and it finally got cold here in Florida, South Florida, I mean, we actually went down to the 40s the other night. I put the little fireplace up there in the corner. And when you're the leader of this project, or you have a team of folks you're leading, you often want to kind of sit down and just have a chat before you get involved with any of the other stakeholders, and just make some questions to yourself and to your team and say, let's see what we considered. So some of the stuff that I always like to think about is, did we make sure that we got everybody as a stakeholder who needed to participate? And you'd be surprised how often we think we know who all the stakeholders are, and then there might be one person who does one small job, and they're in a process, and much later down the road, people will go, well, that's great. Oh, wait, that person does this. And it's a little late for you to then maybe bring them into the fold, but honestly, maybe it can never be too late until you get to the point of deployment. But you want to make sure that everybody thinks about every process and how anyone who might have a touch point within this solution. This doesn't always just include people who are signing the checks. So a lot of times when people think stakeholders, they think executive leadership, who they report to, and they want to know how it was budgeted and planned, and did you spend too much money, or what was the case. But there actually are stakeholders, again, can be in any ancillary division. Risk management is a great one that a lot of times people forget. Maybe even sales and marketing might have a piece because it has to tie into goals and how they do your company goals. So HR systems can go far beyond just managing employee data. You have to think about some of the other talent components, education components, succession components, and again, they may lead you to recruiters within your environment, or again, other ancillary positions. So some of the first questions, again, necessary stakeholders, you got everybody you think you should. Do you have any new ones that maybe have joined? Maybe again, if your company has grown, they may have expanded departments, or they've added people, and spread the jobs out a little bit more, so you now need to involve everybody. Does it mean that everybody has to come? If you find that you have 25 people, does everybody have to come to every call? No. Does it mean that everybody's involved in the whole full project? No. It just means, again, that you've taken the time to figure out, is there anybody that this system, again, potentially could impact the process, a job, responsibility on their part, and then would they, in fact, have impact if some functionality or feature or requirement was not met? Same here with the processes, and I always talk about this too, is again, in the IT land, we have something where it's an as-is process, or as-is diagram shows this is what we currently do. You can create a to-be diagram, which will show you where you want to get to, which means, again, there might be, this is how we did it with one person, now we have three, so there's other people that maybe the document or steps have to span off and onto. But it helps everybody get a sense of where we are today and what is it we're looking to automate in the future. So maybe before everything was paper-based and you collected papers, now you want to be able to scan those and store them in electronic libraries, and that would show the difference between the current and where you want to be. Even if you don't want to get that fancy, just getting a sense of, how does HR spend its day? Where does it spend its time? What is the most time-consuming process that maybe they do? Is it onboarding new employees? Do they not have enough flexibility to do that? Are they collecting too much paper? And to be honest with you, with all of the circumstances we've had in this past year, and we know that we've gone to remote for drastic situations, and we've done a lot of work again online, these processes could be impacted as well by all of those changes. So maybe the way that you used to onboard somebody is not the way you do it anymore. Maybe they don't come to the office like they used to. And what does that mean to not come to the office? So again, thinking about your processes and making sure that you've captured at least again, the very high level ones, and you can get as granular as you need to be here, but You want to make sure that you do have a good understanding of what you want in a product to help support what you're trying to achieve on a daily basis. Excuse me. The other items again here, data sources, integrations. Previously, maybe you didn't have them. Maybe you had them and you didn't anticipate making a connection to the HR system, or just couldn't do it at the time. We do have plenty of customers who use ADP or TriNet or one of the other financial type systems, and maybe they've even had their platform of HR MS systems, but maybe now they want to use something else and they want to be able to bring that data down. It's very important to have that conversation with any ancillary vendor to say, can I get to my data? Because you'd be surprised how oftentimes I've seen this with ADP, that depending on which platform you purchase from them, it either keeps your data solely here and it cannot be exported or used with any other system. And oftentimes you have to actually upgrade platforms in order to have that functionality. They do that for costing models and to keep it, reasonably low cost for people who maybe don't have a lot of employees initially in a growing organization, which I think is a great feature. But ultimately it's a cost you have to think about, and you have to consider if you want to do these types of integrations. Obviously, there are also integrations with security systems and Active Directory on the Microsoft platform. So if you're looking to have kind of the token pass through and you don't have to have it log in multiple times, that's another type of integration you can consider. Learning management platforms is another kind of integration, and even with career sites is another type of integration. So there's plenty of integrations to choose from, and it's good for you to identify now, if you didn't do it previously, what you may need, or if you couldn't get it before, let's go back and revisit that one and see if we can get it this time in the new solution. And then obviously, as I said, all those comments from everybody, functionality, features, people do not hesitate to let IT or HR know what's missing. I'm not able to do this. I want to be able to do that. I think it should look like this. I think it should look like that. I want to be able to report. I want to be able to present. I want more data, less data, whatever it needs to be. I'm sure, again, this is number 4 is not a difficult one to go and get this information from the stakeholders, again, that you've identified. And then 5 throws in that new twist for all of us of supporting remote workers. I saw recently, I forget which company it was, but the majority of the people that they had on site in an office are no longer going to come back. So it was like 80% of their staff was going to remain remote and only 20% was actually going to be in the office. And usually that falls to maybe some of the operational management folks. Again, HR, definitely IT. They always seem to have, those folks always need to seem to be on site. Obviously, the operational folks do, to make sure systems and networks and things like that run on a regular basis. But if you're in that same situation where you're now going to support the majority of folks remotely, you want features and functions that allow not only the employee to interact with the system well, but for HR and maybe learning, or again, succession planning, to interact back to those employees on a good, healthy basis. Sorry. So that's the chat that you might have again with your team before you actually go and approach the stakeholders. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go find the players that you need to have as part of your core selection team. You're going to identify those stakeholders, make sure HR is included if IT is driving the project, make sure IT is included if HR is driving the project. And the reason we want both of those is because, again, that same example I gave earlier is that oftentimes one doesn't necessarily understand always the other's strategy, and can definitely drive the project differently if they don't have those key people participating. I showed here a RACI chart. If you're familiar with ever seeing one of these, typically they're used in projects to identify people as it relates to tasks in the project. So somebody would be responsible for the task, somebody's accountable for the task or the item, and one is just needs to be consulted or communicated to for the information part. The reason I put it here, though, is that you can use something similar when you're trying to identify the participation level of those stakeholders within this project. And this is where it gets back to, if you have 25 people, not everybody needs to be responsible or accountable for something. Usually responsible and accountable lends more itself to IT and HR teams directly, but consultant informed, besides leadership, can also be some of those ancillary positions where you're consulting folks to make sure, again, that you have maybe captured their requirements appropriately or included them in those discussions you need to have when you're talking about features and functionality. Again, it doesn't have to be a big room of people where everybody comes in and throws all their ideas, but it certainly can be. You can also use small groups where you talk just amongst those, again, ancillary folks to say, hey, I know that you have this one core piece that you do, and how would this affect you, or, you know, or does it affect you, or just tell me about your process so that I can capture it. And I'll have some consideration for it later as the team lead, again, for this project. You can obviously survey everybody, capture all their information, features. A lot of times people don't always think about features they want, but they'll definitely tell you the deficiencies that they have. So you take the deficiencies and just turn them into the features or functionality that you're seeking. And that's usually how we kind of turn that on its head. As I noted, you can put everybody in a room or a giant Zoom call. We used to do it in the old days when we could still meet. We would get into a room, everybody would get a sticky notepad. You'd put some key topics up, like say integrations or, you know, again, key features, whatever. And you just have people write what they wanted on those sticky notes, put them under the category headings. And then you could, anybody that had duplicates, you kind of group them up together to get a single idea. You can still do the same thing again with Zoom, and you can use the sticky notes application if you want. But the ultimate goal here is to collect all this information. You may also apply some importance to it, meaning we'll talk about here in a minute, you know, do I really have to have this, or how, you know, is this only important to one person versus the many? And that also drives how this project would be deployed, how it's going to be funded. Oftentimes people think when they go to buy a new system that they have to do everything on that first deployment. Sometimes they do because they get one shot at funding and monies. And if they don't do it then, they're never going to get a chance to do it for maybe several years later on, because that's it. You get your budget, that's it, that's all you get. But a lot of times you can also present your project as having multiple stages or phases, whichever you'd like to call them. And you can launch a we call it a vanilla version of the app. It's kind of an out of the box. You take everything for the way it is, and you let your staff use it for a couple of months, maybe 6 months. And while they're using it, they're going to start to give you more feedback. So they feel good about what they purchased, but we don't do a lot of customizations to it. And ultimately, then you're able to phase in those additional components, maybe some integrations, maybe advanced reporting, whatever, again, is deemed necessary. And you can do it in a phased approach. And that way, nobody's drinking from the fire hose. Nobody's trying to, you know, get everybody ramped up on a system that has a lot of functionality when in fact maybe they won't be using all of it right out of the box. So a couple of different methods to approach collecting, presenting, ultimately gaining that consensus of whether you want to do phases or we're doing it all at once. But again, consensus being really key here is that you want everybody to more or less agree. Doesn't mean somebody won't leave the room maybe unhappy, but more or less with the idea that this is what we're looking for, this is what we need, this is what's going to help us to get us down the next maybe 5 years down the road for growth in our company, for changes, for organizational changes, maybe just for unity across systems. I have a couple of clients who have multiple sub corporations and they just want to be able to bring all the data into one single location. Nothing wrong with that. That actually helps so that at a higher level you can have one single source for that, but it does involve, having integration and data coming from multiple points. So again, whatever is going to work best for you, you're going to figure that out as you gain this information from the players. All right, so then that leads us a little bit further down the road into features and functionality. So can it make toast? Usually everybody wants a system to do just about everything. And that includes, even how your particular company maybe does business or has their processes set. And oftentimes this is no different than any other electronic device that you may pick up. Your iPhone is not going to know everything that you want to do. And we haven't yet gotten to the technology where it can read your mind. So unfortunately, these systems still have to be configured and you still have to determine what it is that you want it to be able to do. And we do start with a good base in the terms of, again, across the industry, we're always looking to have standard features and functions that are important to the HR staff and IT staff who's supporting them. But we can't necessarily shove everything in there. Plus, we don't necessarily want to make too many assumptions because that will limit the product. The goal here is, again, we're on this particular framework and platform so that you can make those customizations and you can change or address new things that arrive, relatively quickly in an agile form. So if you can't do that because the system is hard coded or, standardized a certain way, then it's not as valuable to you. And obviously it makes it a little more limiting for us to, in our case, to sell our product. So, and our vendor being who we are is not necessarily that much different than other vendors trying to sell the same type of product. So let's talk about questions that you can ask, again, your team for collection. Obviously the infamous dislike is always there. Do you need it to augment other systems? I have clients that have multiple systems where they keep data in. And the goal there is we're trying to figure out where are some points of redundancy that we can remove, ease of use between those systems. And again, if one system is really a financial system collecting finance payroll data, and then you want another system to help with performance reviews, then that's your goal. And you just need to make sure, again, that that's the stated goal that you're after and what it is that you're trying to achieve when you're looking for a new system. So again, think about, is it simple to integrate? Should it accommodate contractors, freelancers? We have several clients ourselves here that have that situation as well. And they're oftentimes completely different. Their work schedules are different. Their pay schedules are scales are different. Their just the way they're tracked, whether they show in the organizational chart or not, if they're shown as inactive, or types of jobs, employment type. Again, it's important to make sure you identify all the types, all the scenarios, and if your current system doesn't have that, then again, that becomes one of the questions and one of the key functionality requirements. The other question you can also ask or consider, this can come from the IT side. There's a couple of these are more IT based here. How long is it going to take to transfer data? So if you had to bring it out of the old system, do you have a way to get it out of your current system to be able to transfer it into another system? Again, sometimes that can get to be an issue if you didn't pay for a platform where you can export your data. You may have to pay the company to do that for you, provide you some Excel-based CSV files, and be able to transfer it somewhere else or put it in a SQL database or something to that effect. And then what will the system do to impact your current teams who are supporting it, taking care of it, care and feeding, all that. What's it going to mean if are you going to bring the system in-house? Are you going to leverage a hosted solution? All very technical questions, again, to consider as part of the collection. So if you're HR, you would task your IT staff to determine those types of things. Is it better to use a cloud-based solution at this point, now that we've grown in that, or is it still good to keep it in-house? Financial institutions who we have again as clients often have to do that for privacy and security purposes. So it could be that it's a no-brainer and it's not a question that even needs to be considered because it's just going to be the way it is. Ultimately, you're going to move into defining what those requirements are. Must-have functionality versus nice-to-have features. Big key here, because a lot of times when you ask your stakeholders, what is it that they have to have functionality or feature-wise, they'll just kind of list everything and anything that either they read about or they've seen or they really do need. The key here between a must-have and a nice-to-have is to really go back and task them and say, is there anything that it's not so much that you can live without, but it's a way, again, to rank these items so that when you are determining what vendors may fit this new solution you're seeking, you can weight which ones they may have right out of the box that match your must-have, meaning you cannot even consider this system if it doesn't have this functionality. Again, if you think about iPads and iPhones and new TVs, we all do that on a regular basis. We go in the store, a TV has to be a certain size, and it just has to be that big because you got a big enough wall. Or maybe it's not big and you have a small space and you just want to put it in the kitchen as a small TV. So you have those must-need pieces. And then nice to have would be that it's, 1080p, it's 4K, HD, again, makes toast, all that good stuff. Those would be nice to haves. And being able to see the difference and getting your team and your stakeholders to see the difference allows you more flexibility, especially if you're going to do those phased approaches, because what you can say is, here's what we're going to do for the must-haves. That's going to be in the first release because we have to have this in order to meet our new requirements for a new system since we've outgrown the last one. But now we will also want to phase in some of these nice to have features. So it's not that we're going to ignore them, and we're just going to take our time in expending them a little bit across a period of time. And again, for funding purposes, that often is a nice compromise. Makes people in finance department very happy when you don't want to just get a big check up front. Just depends, again, on how your company manages that budget and how they, divvy up the cash across all the organization. Once you get through that exercise, again, from some of those previous questions, you're going to get that checklist. These are the items. You can list next to them whether they're must-haves versus nice-to-haves, so that if you want, you put it as an Excel, you can sort it. You then would try to find the vendors, again, that are going to meet your needs. And there's a variety of folks out there, obviously, different levels that support different levels within the organization. Some vendors like to work with small companies, some only like to work with large companies and have big price tags that go along with it. And then there's obviously some that work across the small, middle, and large platforms. And which is going to be most important to you, again, will come to light. Maybe you worked with a small company who didn't have enough support, resources, response time, any of those things, updates, releases, fixes. Again, sometimes when it's a very small company, they have some challenges there. So maybe you need to be inconsiderate of a company that can provide you more of those things, again, if those were found as deficiencies. If you need really more clarity, you can conduct a really formal request for information process or RFP. You can do pricing and information if you want. If you're a larger organization, you may do this just, again, because oftentimes larger organizations have more people involved and people like to see a more formal process conducted. And essentially what an RFI is, you're going to put your requirements together again in that checklist. You're going to send a document off to the vendors that you choose after you've made contact with them and say, here's what I'm seeking. Please respond how you would solve these functionality or feature requests. So say one of your functionality requests was, I need more expanded reporting functionality. From Lanteria's perspective, we would write next to it, we have an integration with Power BI, and you can leverage that solution to go beyond the reporting that exists in the product itself. And that would be what you would expect back from that vendor. They would return the document with responses. If you've asked for pricing, they would provide that as well. And this is going to be part of the detail that you're then going to bring your team together, review it, and figure out what are going to be the next steps and who are those next steps going to be with. So some of the questions you also can ask within the RFI. So not everything has to be the checklist, but you can also just state some standard questions. And obviously here's some of them. So the ongoing costs are probably going to be key. So what does that mean to do support? What's the annual support cost? Support agreement. How, in our case, like we will project how many hours that you may need over the course of a year. Can I buy more? How much does it cost to buy more? How do you price that out? So those are some of the questions. How does it handle compliance? Is it secure compliance? Again, especially in the hosted arena. Is it compatible with your industry, and the size of your company is also key. And you can think about, worked with another team once that we made a version of our product. We had like a plug-in that was specific for the collections industry. And that was a platform that you could bolt on to our standard solution, but it drew a lot of interest because people who were in that industry were seeking this. And as a result, that became a key component for them. Be able to have that functionality again right out of the box, and just had to buy the bolt-on is key. So same here with your system compatible with your industry. If there are particular components, maybe working with career sites or learning sites that are key, again, you want to make sure that the solution, how would this particular product solve some of those things? So you just present those again in questions. The user-friendly, everybody's going to say, yeah, my product's user-friendly, but you maybe want to be a little bit more definitive about how does it need to be user-friendly? Does it have an employee self-service? Is it easy for the employee to see his employee card and details? How about looking at performance reviews? Is that easy for them to do? If I want to allow my employees to be able to update their personal contact details, can I do that? Is it easy for them to do those kinds of things? Emergency contacts, that's always kind of key too. So you might want to be more specific rather than just say, is it user-friendly? So it's kind of a broad question at this point. Is it system customizable? Of course. Cloud-based, premises, what platforms can it run on? Again, this is a lot about how does the product function and what you would want to hear back again from that vendor. Some of the things to consider, some of these key features, especially for hopefully the new year coming and beyond, that is software as a service. So that first one there, SaaS, that's what it stands for, software as a service. Cloud-based, another term, takes it out of your environment, means less maintenance, less upgrade the hardware over a certain period of years, because again, we outgrow hardware. Those costs get saved because they ride over on the vendor side, or whoever is supporting the SaaS solution. So that could be a key tool. Again, SaaS means that everybody can get to it, not a lot of gymnastics to log in. Again, there are certainly secure preventatives to log into the site. I don't mean like it's wide open like an internet, YouTube, but again, it means that you're able to access it pretty much from anywhere you are. So if you happen to find yourself in Fiji in a coffee cafe, you can log in if you want, though people might not recommend that because it's out in the open public domain, but I think you get my drift. Again, it's available, more accessible, no matter where you are. Plus, again, maintenance is a little easier. Conference tools for interviewing and performance evaluation. This gets really key, especially if people are working remote. You want to be able to still have a nice workflow, some functionality that, again, doesn't necessarily lend itself to a lot of paperwork and a lot of movement of documents between people. Time tracking, timesheets, because again, now that we're not all face-to-face anymore, this may become an item that you now need in your system that you didn't before. And the flexible learning schedule, again, now there's some more features, just learning in general, just being able to provide learning and having it easily accessible, making sure that the targets that were set in your performance review is carried over to education and what's available, be that in-house, purchased, any other integrations that you have where you're linking out to other solutions. And a mobile app is also nice because, again, people on the go, people remote, can use multiple tools, and the mobile app is a good platform to be able to check, especially from your management perspective, more so than maybe your employees, because again, they may be able to move a workflow along or accept or decline or, you know, make some decisions, even if they do have to travel or, again, are away from the tethered office. And then some of the newer features, I think we're seeing a strong shift toward social, what social media does for us, but a more of a social platform within all of our applications. I know that we added some features in our product, such as announcements and employee feedback with kind of like a Twitter stream where people can congratulate one another within the company itself when they've worked together on a project and they want to provide some accolades to one another and show that across the company. Again, that builds a sense of community, especially when people are remote and they don't quite, again, have the one-on-one FaceTime. Even with the Zoom, it's maybe just not enough to be able to appreciate each other's efforts. And these might become some of the tools. So again, integration with maybe Microsoft Teams, again, that Microsoft platform, or being able to, you know, brand or announce things across the platform is going to be key. So more considerations. Again, these are all features, things to think about as you're trying to determine where do I go to next. And then some of the questions, again, that you can not only ask about the product, but this is specifically to the vendor of choice. So this is how does the vendor operate and provide support services to you as a client. Data protection becomes really key, especially in the cloud solutions. Does the vendor offer training, sophisticated training, extensive training? Can you purchase custom training, or is there package training? Those become key questions. Support services, very, very important. So again, this means, is there an administrative portal? Is there consulting services? Is there a ticket system, help desk ticket system? Is there after hours support? What can you expect in terms of response times? So again, this may lean itself more to IT than HR to answer some of these, you know, or raise some of these questions to be answered, but they are key questions. So if you are HR and you're the only one that has to manage moving to the next platform, these become some good questions for you to ask, despite, you know, not having a large IT department behind you. Policies on updates, upgrades, bug fixes, also very key. How often do releases come out? How often do new functionality and features come out? How often do they take your feedback? Do they take your feedback? Is there a method for you to be able to do that? Can you be heard? And then can you find some like users within your vendor of choice's community to say, hey, we all are really interested in this particular feature. It'd be really great if you could get it. There's a big difference between one person asking for it and 10 or 20 people asking for it. And that is oftentimes what drives what comes next. And despite the vendors often having their own roadmaps of where they want to take their product, they often will look to their clients to determine what might be some features and functions that they can add that will again improve the overall product, but also will provide ease of use for those clients that we're choosing to raise that item. So again, some more considerations. And then as you're getting all that information, again, questions out to the vendor about the vendor, questions about their product, questions and statements about this is what we're looking for, and can you do it, and how do you do it, all become the goal here toward working toward a decision. You're going to eventually identify the vendors. Maybe you found 15 that you thought were good, but after they've responded, you found that maybe there were only 5 that actually really met the majority of what you needed. Not only where you want to get to where you've outgrown, but also where you want to go. Again, like I said, next 5, 10 years, depending on how far out you want to expand that. You're going to identify those vendors, and essentially you're probably also going to rate those. You can give them a score, percentage score, 100 being the top. How close did they come? Do they meet 92% of your features? Do they meet maybe they only meet 70%, but maybe there's still something about it that you like because there's flexibility, or they've got a new release on the horizon that's going to, bump them up to 90%. Again, you can rate these vendors, determine what might be the top ones. And again, any number works here. You may come down to where it's only one that really meets your needs the best, and that makes it a lot easier. But ultimately, anywhere from like 5 to 10 is a good number to work with, and work between those as you continue to figure out which one's going to be the best. You also want to think about at this point, now that you've gotten these responses, is to agree on a project timeline. What are you looking at in terms of deploying this to your environment? A lot of times it comes down to you're in the 3rd or 4th quarter of the year, and January 1 is when everybody gets a performance review, or you start the performance review process. If that's your goal, you want to get a new system on board so that you can accomplish that and move people to a new system, or give them something that they didn't have previously, then that helps drive what's the timeline. Do you have 2 months, 1 month, 6 months, a year? HR systems aren't necessarily quick to deploy, though I'm not sure there's any solution necessarily that has some complexity to it that's quick to deploy anymore, just because everybody, again, has a lot to say about what it needs to do. And there is the whole impact of switching people over to a particular system. Sorry. Let's kill the phone call. Sorry. So that becomes the timeline. Do you want phases for the selection process as well? So again, we went through collection, we went through queries out to the vendor, and now do we have to have a decision phase? You can kind of scale out the project, determine where that decision point for the final solution needs to come, and then you can move forward into actually getting into the implementation, deploying the product. In the interim, you can set up product demos. You can adjust vendor matches, meaning once you've seen the product demos, you can kind of adjust whether or not they're a good match or not. And then you can conduct any kind of follow-up demos that you need to for additional teams. So again, not everybody has to come to that initial meeting. You can add people and have multiple reviews again as you continue through the process. Once again, collect and present those findings. So maybe we went from 5 down to 3 key vendors, and again, gain that consensus from the team. This is the goal always, is that you're going to end up with a solution that everybody's going to be relatively happy with, and that everybody feels like their needs have at least been heard and will maybe eventually be addressed one way or the other. Matchmaker, make me a match. So for your selection, some of the other things you might want to also consider is I'm a small business and I need a good solution. I need more than what I had, but I don't want to get carried away. But I may want a system that will also grow with me, depending on how far I take my business. So some of the things here is you want to at least gain as much basic functionality as you can from that solution. The most purposeful features that you require must be there. And that's going to be the key driver for you for your selection. Now, if you're a growing business or you're a much larger scale business, again, some of the things that you're looking for could be future and not only have those basics solidified and there, which you might have had in the previous solution, but now you want to take it to the next level and you want to find out and determine what features and functionalities are going to get you to the next level. So now maybe again, it's more focused on remote and supporting remote workers, or it's expanding into a learning library or a recruiting module or something to that effect that you didn't have maybe as part of the solution prior, or again, didn't have enough functionality to be able to support what you need, especially if you're growing for recruiting. And then last but not least, the vendor of choice. So here, looking at the vendor itself, what do they bring to the table? What are they going to have for you? So language support is key. Do they have support of other countries support as well as industry support? So do they and have they worked well with financial industries before or consulting firms before? Oftentimes, again, myself from personal experience in implementations, even especially for Lanteria, we talk about the business. I do research once I'm given a client a little bit about their business and where their focus might be in terms of how their company is going to operate. We have several companies that work with us, many that are consulting-based companies. That is their sole service. And internally, when they work with their people, they do it more on a kind of a flat matrix scale, and people and individuals are moved about the organization, and they don't necessarily always have that very standard structure where I always report to this person. A lot of times it's feedback comes from people they've worked with on projects with particular clients. And you want a system, again, that can adjust for that, be able to gather feedback in their performance form from various sources, not just, again, the standard hierarchy of employee to manager, and that's the only back and forth that you have. So being able to not only think about industry in terms of what you might need from the system, but also in terms of how your company operates is key. And again, the vendor also should be fairly flexible, not only maybe in growth, because if you do bring that client idea in to say, hey, this is really something that I think would benefit, you and future releases of your product, and we're willing to work with you on that. You want a vendor who can also be able to take that into consideration, say, okay, yeah, it's worth my while to work with this particular person and say, yeah, we're in good shape and we're going to build something together. It doesn't always have to just be a customization for one. Some of the other things to think about is SP stands for SharePoint. So SharePoint scalability here in our case, being able to move again across that platform relatively easy. Out of the box integration, so we have quite a number in our solution. So again, this is kind of speaking to Lanteria's solution, but think about those as well for any of the products that you might be looking at. Multi-language support, mobile app, again, all the things that we just showed on the previous slides, you want to be able to consider those when you are defining what do you need for the next go round. So selecting the vendor. At the very end, you're going to qualify these pricing models. Somebody's going to be able to come and say to you, that's too much money, or this is all that you have. So you have to work within any of those constraints. You can continue to negotiate the products and services that you're going to get from that vendor and see what is possible, again, fitting your needs. Think about any country and local laws. I have one particular client that can make a lot of government and union, and their business rules all have to come into play. And that was probably exceedingly challenging for them when they're trying to find a product, because you do have to have those considerations. So you have to have enough flexibility and customization available to be able to handle that diversity. And at the same time, you don't want to go off track so much that you custom configure it to death, and then you're so off of the standard out of the box product that it makes it very difficult to upgrade, and you kind of get stuck, and ultimately that doesn't lead to a good place. Also, don't forget about any data protection and security requirements that you may have, and how does the vendor meet those? Because some of those, again, are non-movable items. They cannot be changed. They cannot be worked around. They just have to be. So making sure that, again, that vendor has met those are going to be critical path. One of the other things you can think about when you're getting ready to select that vendor is return on investment. Again, the financial folks love these considerations, but they are good to be, again, part of your business case to say, hey, this may be why we're selecting this over someone else. You want to think about any of the costs that are associated. This can include, again, if the solution is in-house, what kind of hardware, software needs to be set up in order to support it. If it's not in-house, it's cloud-based. How much does that service cost on a monthly basis? What do you do for maintenance and management of that? Do you need more staff to help with maintenance and management of that? Any of the integrations that you're including, do you have those integrations already? What's it going to cost if you have to do anything with that other vendor in order to work with this new product? Easy or hard? Again, that can be a deciding factor. Time zones for support services. Does it cover all of your locations? Is there any challenges related to, again, where you are in the world as it relates to the product? Self-services, again, things that are chargeable versus included. Data protection services, improvements, all those things you can, again, some of these things you can put an absolute number on, and a lot of these things become intangible. And as a result, ROI can only get you so far. In the old days, if you used to invest in a certain platform and you bring it in-house and we put it in the data center, it costs X, Y, and Z to put in the equipment. It costs X, Y, and Z to staff up for it. This might be a little more challenging now in the cloud-based world, but there's still costs that are associated, and you can still show the depreciation over a period of time if you do it over 3 years, 5 years, whatever. Again, would make finance comfortable. But again, if you can get a return on investment, sometimes that's just a matter of seeing the functionality. Again, a company I used to work for, the solution that we sold, I remember going on site, talking to their executives, and one of the things that they asked was that they wanted to be able to see a return on investment. So they paid out a certain amount of money for our solution, and they wanted to see that money, that investment come back to them in a very short period of time. I think the gentleman told me like a month. While we were training that very day, we found a scenario where one of his team members had actually spent, I think it was about 2 hours on a phone call with another, it was one of their clients, and that cost them money. Anytime they were on the phone, the goal was to be on the phone and kind of get off the phone, get the option done quickly and turned it around. The solution that we were deploying for them tracked how long people were actually on the phone and how long the call was. And when he saw that that call was 2 hours long, he saw right then and there a return on his investment, because he now could see when people were spending far too long on a phone conversation, that was costing him cash. So what you can do is you go in and you can then say to those people, we need to change your behavior. If you're not done in like a half hour with this person, you got to cut the call and move on to the next person. And your goal is this, not to talk to somebody for 2 hours. And that is, you can put some costs around that, but a lot of that, again, could potentially be intangible. It's just changing people's behavior. But without the information, he couldn't have made that be known that he needed to even change that behavior. And that was one of his seasoned people on the phone calls, so he would have expected different behavior from them anyway. And to see it there in real time that that wasn't the case, again, gave back that ROI very quickly to him. And he admitted that right then and there on the spot that he was very happy that the expense was worth it. And while he felt like he could still get some more data and more, again, actual values back that would be numeric based for that investment, it gave him that sense that he made the right choice and he picked a good product to give him the data that he was seeking. Same here for your HR system. You want to pick something that is going to give you that return, and it's going to still be an investment. We all know these are operational systems for maybe nonprofit components within the company, but they are very critical and they are key. And if you do have to stand up to an audit, or you have to stand up to maybe you want some kind of certification for standardization of your processes, you have to have something that's going to support that. And you can also show that this product would be able to do that for you. And that's going to make it more valuable than maybe a product that doesn't. So we have this little cool ROI calculator. You can go to this particular link and web page, and you can run the calculator and see how you might be able to present some of that information back. And obviously you can use this even if you're not picking our product, but we're going to hope that you try to select our product in your choices. And then finally getting the plan back together. So now we've picked the vendor, we have a new solution, and I'm going to put on my PM hat and I'm going to tell you some of the things again on how to move into, I've got this new solution that I've selected as part of my growth, and I want to deploy it and I want to get it out there and show the value of this new solution and all the features and functionality. So very key here on this deployment team is you want to make sure that your HR team understands the ownership components they have for the application functionality. It's really up to them to understand how the system works, and they need to participate in the product and the use of the product so that they feel confident with it and again take a certain ownership level with it. Same for the IT team. They also need to own their component. So if it's on premise or even if it's hosted, understanding where they play a role in management of this application is going to be really critical. You want to make sure everybody understands what the goals and objectives are. So again, if you're doing that phased approach, here's the goal and objectives of this first phase, second phase, third phase, so on. If you're doing it all in one big gulp, you still want to make sure everybody understands that that is the goal and that you may be really pressed hard to make sure that you can fit within the time frame that's been set. There's going to be a lot of work to do. Look at your lessons learned from previous implementations. That's always key to make sure you learn for the next time. You say, oh, I needed more documentation, less documentation, more meetings, less meetings, whatever it needed to be. And again, any items, again, that might have been missing, like a communication plan, training plan, support strategy, things that might not have been clear. Maybe you made some assumptions that people would understand, but oftentimes it's nice to, even if you just do a one-page sheet, it's good to say, this is the support strategy. It's on one page and just everybody has it and they can understand what to do. And that means from both sides. So if it's HR, what happens if something breaks? Who do I call? You know, and maybe that's the vendor, not necessarily internal IT. But if it's this, maybe you would call internal IT. So again, maybe if it's the hardware versus the application, trying to make that distinction for folks who might not be very techy. And then again, as the lead of this project moving forward, you'd also want to make sure you understand all the services that were purchased and provided. Somebody else has made the decision about the product and you weren't involved in all of that. Definitely want to review the contracts for what was agreed to and how to, you know, again, the system would work and what are the challenges that might be if something wasn't included. Schedule a team availability. This really becomes key because if you're ready to go, but the rest of the team's not ready to go, or again, the timeline hasn't been set appropriately, and you start the project and then you have some other initiative that kicks in, like, I don't know, end of year taxes or something like that, that takes everybody away, or it is the end of the year and everybody takes holiday, and that's, to get your critical path, you just lost 2 weeks of staffing or more, then again, this becomes really, really important to make sure you understand when everybody's around. It's one thing to say, hey, when are you on vacation? When are you on vacation? But often, usually that's people are off times, though Christmas is kind of off the table because everybody likes to take that air time around that New Year's and Christmas time. But they might take a week and they may take a week, and there isn't really a true impact if they're each taking a summer vacation week. But if you do have a lot of unavailability due to other efforts, projects, maybe a key resource is working on some other project and they're not going to be available for a whole year, that's going to be an issue, and you need to understand again, what's that up front. You can't just assume that your project's ready to go. Well, you can't assume, but people, and often do assume, but people will find that they'll get tripped up somewhere along the line if they don't think about that in advance. Change management plan, always a good idea. Again, this can be as formal as you need it to be. Some companies like very fancy ones and actually have teams that just manage change. But this one, again, is all about maybe more, it should be called socialization of the product, because oftentimes people don't like change, and being able to move them into a new system or doing something different, or maybe a system period versus paperwork. A lot of times that's met with some pushback, and they don't like to change, and they like the way things are right now. Usually because they understand them, they know them, they're familiar with them, and now they're being challenged. Again, this goes back to user-friendliness of the system and making sure you have those processes identified to make sure that you can make it as easy as it can be. I'm not saying that everything can be easy, but again, this is part of that socialization to bring people forward. And it's really important, again, why certain key teams need to participate in this project from the beginning. Supplemental training materials, that's kind of a given. And then the last but not least, always make sure you do the reasonable, achievable delivery date. This is probably one of the hardest things. People always say they want to do this, and then maybe some nice executive walks in the room and says, I need it in 2 months. And kind of blows your reasonable, achievable delivery date out of the water. But good time to think on your feet and say, what is that person willing to accept in that 2 months? Is it, again, that out-of-the-box solution? I can get this up and running reasonably in this amount of time. Otherwise, you're going to have to give me more time. There's always room for negotiation. It's not necessarily always an easy discussion, but it is worthwhile to at least attempt it. You may still come back and say, you got 2 months, got to do the whole thing. And then you're just going to have to really understand what needs to be get done. Make sure you assign tasks as much as you can so that everybody's working conjointly on things. And again, hope for the best that you can make the, again, the release that you're looking for. And then finish strong. The key piece here is that you're putting in an HR system for employees. So those employees that, again, will now be expected to use this solution, they're not necessarily going to live in there every day like HR might, but they do use the system. You want them to use the system. So have some fun with this deployment. Think about, I've had clients that rename our solution. In our case, they rename the solution and they have a contest for names. They launch it from their intranet site, so in-house site. And a lot of times they're trying to link it to other things, or maybe they have an icon that they want everybody to pick from. They have, again, contests around that. Lunch and learn events, also very good and very helpful. You can do a couple of things there. Teams can record videos and show the videos during the lunch and learns, or you can do a live lunch and learn, record it, and then you have it available for anybody who comes new to the company. That's always really key, because it's easy to say, here's all the people that are on site right today, but when I go to hire 40 more people, who's going to teach them? Are you going to be ready to do that again? Or, do you need to have more events? But maybe if you had done the video, it might be enough to get everybody who's onboarding, again, erratically. You wouldn't think that maybe all 40 are coming in at once. Again, you can either do it live or you can do recordings. And then everybody who doesn't like a prize. So contests again for who's the first to update their emergency contact. So you give them the knowledge to be able to do it. First person who doesn't emails, again, the HR lead or whoever it needs to go to, I don't know. In the old days, again, we used to like get a day where you could wear blue jeans to the office or something like that. Now we're all sitting around on our PJs, so I don't know that that's so important, but maybe something else. Starbucks card, if you want to go through the drive-through, that kind of thing. So just have fun, think creatively, try to make it fun because, again, these products can be overwhelming. The projects to select can be overwhelming. And just as you finish that up, you're ready to start actually implementing the project. And that also can be very overwhelming. So again, trying to have some fun with any of the projects you do, ultimately, I think, makes it more interesting. All right, we're at Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I think you can, let's see, I think they're in the Q&A section. Let me see. If they're not, they're in my chat section. But if you don't have anything today, but you think of things, that's fine. Whatever comes to mind, you certainly can raise again with me or our sales staff. If you want more information about our product and how it can help you move from the previous solution into maybe a more feature-rich or integration-rich product, don't hesitate to reach out. You can go to our website at www.lanteria.com. And I thank you for your time today. Everybody have a nice holiday.